Today we're going to talk about options in case you decide to have your loved one spend their last days in a facility other than your own home. But the first topic we're going to talk about is something called palliative care. And this is a stream of medicine that strives to provide quality of life for anyone who is injured or sick or dying, and that takes into account the person's culture, their beliefs and their values, and certainly their language. When I think about hospitals and nursing homes and hospices, I think about one of the experts that his book that I reviewed when he was talking about these facilities, and he mentioned something about the danger of having the power given to strangers in situations when there is already heightened anxiety and fear. And that pretty much sums up what a hospital or nursing home or even a hospice environment meant to me. There were a lot of professionals making a lot of decisions that sometimes seemed cold and detached from our human reality. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was one of the first, I want to say, doctors who really embraced the understanding of what dying patients were going through in the 60s, she discovered that our advances in medical technology have actually taken us away from the spiritual sacredness of the dying experience. And so she was asking herself, even back in the 60s, are we really doing the right thing by offering these options for human beings to choose from? It was in a hospital when I first realized that my mother had an assortment of bracelets on her hand, and one was a barcode. And I remember sitting in that room with her. I was studying for a statistics exam, and I wrote in my notes, "Oh my God, my mother has a barcode." And I get the process aspect of this, that my mother's condition was entered into a computer, and that system was linked to a number for her, and that every time they did something for her, they would scan her barcode. Hospitals in general, they are not there to help the dying, although many old people die in hospitals. And I believe that the hospice organizations or the hospice industry was created in the later 60s as a response to all of these people dying in hospitals. The person who first came up with the idea thought, you know what, this doesn't seem right. We could give them a better option, something that was more familiar, something that was less technical and less sterile. And so hospitals are proficient for the most part in helping people recover from surgeries, from illnesses and injuries. But hospitals are the organizations that have the highest infection rates. When you're in a hospital and you are diagnosed as being terminal, or if you're at home and then diagnosed as terminal, you have the option of going into a hospice, and you have the option of either having hospice care in your home or in the hospital. When my mother was in the hospital, I was not given that option. I was told that she should go directly to a standing hospice. If you choose that option, a hospice representatives would come and help you on a weekly schedule. Hospices are supposed to provide you with more comprehensive care, I would say. I think they embrace the palliative care aspect of caring for a person, and they also try to help your symptoms. Hospices will not help cure whatever it is you're suffering from. So if you're diagnosed as terminal, you may get better in a hospice just because you may experience a short-term reprieve, which is something my mother did, but you may not. Hospices are there to keep you comfortable, and they are supposed to approach your experience from a mind, body, and soul connection. My experience in the hospice was not favorable. My mother had 2 accidents in the hospice that we had selected, and she also, I felt, was over-medicated. I saw her every single day, and there were moments when I just felt like she was just drugged. to such a high extent that she was either acting as if she were out of her mind or she was comatose. So hospices, for me, were a negative experience, but I know that for some they've been a very positive one. I found through my research that the difference more than likely was seen when the hospice was either a nonprofit or for-profit. For the for-profit hospices, those seem to have more legal litigations filed against them, and the nonprofits had much fewer. So I think it has to do with their culture. I think it has to do with their main goal. Are they in the business to make money? Or are they in the business to help someone experience their end of life? In the middle between hospitals and hospices are nursing homes. Nursing homes are often also rehabilitation centers, and my mother was sent to one when she was actually getting some of her cognitive skills back. But she was only in a rehabilitation/nursing home for a few days before she was right back in the hospital. It was in the hospice that she got a really bad infection. In the nursing home that she got a really bad infection. And when she went back to the hospital, they told me she would be dead in 2 days. I didn't know this, but there is a national database that lets you know the deficiency scores for every single nursing home. It also lets you know deficiencies for hospices and hospitals. And what I found curious was that hospitals and nursing homes had to be reviewed every few years, but for hospices, it's a much longer period, like 15. And so my thought about that was, do we not care when people are in hospices and dying? Do we not care that their infection rates are managed, or that they're treating their patients with dignity, or that there's nutritional issues or safety issues or even abuse issues? Do we not care in hospices? So for me, navigating through this healthcare system and end-of-life industry, it was really confusing and frustrating. And that is where I became the advocate. To see my mother with a barcode on her and to be almost treated like a product. To have hospices focused more on billable goods and procedures. One of the people that I interviewed said that he used to work for a hospice, and as a personal care provider, he was asked to brush the teeth of a dying man just to check it off the list. The man was actively dying, and the hospice worker was forced by his supervisor to brush this man's teeth, and it wasn't a good experience for either one of them. In any of these facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, or hospices, you have to do your homework. I found out later that the hospice that had been chosen for me, because basically the representative who came to talk to me about hospice care was representing only one corporation, that hospice had 7 different lawsuits filed against it, or grievances filed against it, and I didn't know. I would not have sent my mother there if I had known they had even one. And so this is where we go back to planning your dying experience. If you don't plan it, other strangers will plan it, and they will organize your day-to-day life, if you can call it a life at that point, the way they see fit. You will die in the manner that they think you should. And I think this is something we should question and we should stand against. Because the quality of the experience is what matters. And I think we have the right to question professionals. Even though they have the technology to save our lives, are they saving our lives in a manner which allows us to have our dignity? And in a manner in which it allows us to tell our final story to those that matter. And that's something to consider. So in our next segment, we're talking about what you would need if you were going to take care of a loved one at home. So stay tuned.